All right, welcome, Adam, to the Leaders Who Care series.
Thanks for having me, Mark. I'm excited to be here. Hope you had great holidays. We can kick off 2026 with a bang.
Exactly. Make it the year to remember, if possible.
It will be. For a lot of reasons, I think it will be a year to remember.
Well, I know you are a leader who cares, and now we're going to show the world here, or at least part of the world, why you are a leader who cares. And if you can start by briefly introducing yourself, and I always put an asterisk with men because men start by what they do generally when I ask them that,
Right.
but that's not the question. Tell me a little bit about where you're from originally, where you are now, whatever you feel comfortable sharing about family, maybe something you've never told anybody that you want to share now. That's always cool. Sometimes a surprise as well. So tell us a little bit about you.
Ooh, how about me? It's my life's been a journey, right? And an adventure and and unpredictable. And I think I like that. I like change. I like unpredictability. I like uncertainty. I kind of thrive in that. A friend of mine in college, it wasn't his quote, but I heard it from him, and I've sort of used that in my life of dare to fail gloriously. Um, so
Love
I
that.
apply that personally, professionally, whatever it is. And so I'm 55 for another 2 days. I turn 56 in a couple of days.
All right.
And live in Denver, Colorado now. Spent first, I grew up in suburban New Jersey predominantly, then lived in New York City for 21 years with my wife, and we had our children there. We moved from New York City in 2014 to Los Angeles when our oldest was 12 and our younger one was 9. I and then now live in Denver, Colorado. A couple of years ago, moved to Colorado. Once our youngest went off to school for a lot of reasons, felt like we wanted to change. Like we've always loved the mountains, and so Colorado made sense. There's lots to talk about there for sure. And so father, two daughters, 24, 21. We were talking earlier. My youngest is literally 2 days ago had her wisdom teeth out, so is in bed in massive pain. God, I remember that. I was a big baby when that happened to me in my early 20s, as many are. And my wife is my best friend, my partner. I believe in soulmates, so a soulmate. And we've been married for 31 years.
Wow.
Um,
Way to go.
and yeah, and look, as everyone knows, it's not easy. It's not a straight line. I think most of us have at least three, maybe four marriages, even within one. Because when you first get married, us in our 20s, you're a very different person. But being a married couple, young with no children, that's your first marriage. I think either hopefully before, but certainly shortly after having your first child, you have your second marriage, and hopefully you've talked about it and make sure you like. To me, it means you wanted to recommit to it.
Right.
Um, and so I think then you have a marriage of when you're raising children, and that's its own unique thing.
It is.
And then you get to your third marriage, right? Which is when your kids are at least in college, if not further, where you're back to being a couple, but now you're a couple probably in your at least late 40s or in your 50s. And that's a very different marriage than when you're a couple in your 20s, right? And I think you have to redecide at that point, are you going to recommit to each other for either the rest of your life, or there may be a fourth marriage of, when you really start aging that you have to recommit to each other. But um, so we're in the middle of all those, but it's never a straight line. And then professionally, I spent the first 20 years of my life
Well, we'll get
in
into
the
that in a minute. We'll get into that
okay.
in a minute. But yeah, that's fascinating how some people have those different marriages in one marriage, and some people have them in multiple
Yeah,
marriages.
correct.
Because you do change as people, which is good. That's
Right.
what do they say? Youth is wasted on the young type of thing. And then so you get through that period, and then you go on and
Hmm.
on and on. So 31 years, that's pretty impressive, though. So congrats. I mean, I don't know how she
Thank
did
you.
it. I don't know how she did it with you, but
I don't know either. And I think if she were on this, she would say, I'm not sure how I did it and why I did it. But I mean, I think, but
so you
it's a
may.
lot.
Yeah,
It's a lot of
yeah.
work.
Well, yeah, because we're human beings, right? And
Right.
we're complicated people in that sense. And so you mentioned your kids. What were you like as a kid? What were you like as a kid, a teenager? Were you like a Michael J. Fox on Family Ties, or were you sports, music, tech? What were you into?
I was totally Michael J. Fox and Family Ties.
Really?
Um, totally. I mean, um, yeah, I was a smart kid. I did well in school, all those basics. And that was sort of ultimately for me my to independence. Like, I'm not close with my parents and my family. There's, lot. My parents, I would describe them as parents who knew how to read the book, but not necessarily knew how to have the emotion and the connection and the support that you needed. So I don't have a close relationship with them. And for me, academic success, which was one way to keep them off my case, was important. But also, I started to realize that was my pathway to personal, financial, professional independence, and to be and do what I wanted to do versus needing help and support, right? Because I mean, the last vestige of parents who want to use it that way is money, right? Where they can use it for control. And I'm not, my wife and I are not that at all that way with our children. But for me, getting financial independence meant I had personal and emotional and every form of independence. So I was on that path. And so I was like doing school, I'm, going to Wall Street, I mean, like, I didn't, it's like my best friend growing up when I was like 7, 8, 9, 10, his father, they had the biggest house I knew. They had a Rolls Royce, like all this great stuff. I'm like, what does your dad do? And he's like, he's an investment banker. I said, I don't know what that is, but I'm doing that.
The dream came before the actual
Right.
whatever
I was
the
like,
work was.
whatever it is, I like the outcome. And so
Right.
eventually I figured out what Wall Street was and where it is. And that was, after graduating from college, I went right into finance and into private equity, actually. And so, but that was sort of my journey to getting on a path and then really figuring out, still am, but really, I think starting to figure out who I, who I was and who I am in my 20s and beyond. And I mean, I've had a lot to learn the hard way many times.
Was there anything when you were like 10, 11, 12? By the way, did you have brothers, sisters?
I'm the oldest. I have a younger brother and a younger sister.
Okay, so was there anything that you did when you were 10, 11, 12? Were you reading the newspaper? Were you playing sports? Were you playing music? What were you thinking at that point?
Sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, I was a on the wrestling team, both starting probably at 10 or 11 and through high school. So from a sports perspective, I was a wrestler. Um, yeah, I I certainly read the sports pages every morning in the New York Times. That was my thing. And and then I paid attention to business and finance and things like that. So I remember this bank that I had my savings account in was converting from basically mutual into a public company. It's like, oh, buying shares. So it was the first time I bought stock in something. I don't know. Well, right, whatever. Um, but started to understand and begin to figure those things out, and always had that interest. And so I was that. I mean, and then, I was that awkward teenager trying to figure myself out. My parents put me a year ahead. Like I started school a year early, so I was always a year younger than everybody. That's, I wouldn't, we didn't do that with our kids. I think that to me was a massive mistake, certainly for a boy, because boys mature later. Certainly
Right.
for a boy who wasn't like huge, right? I'm 5'8" now. I was not the big kid. I would have been the smaller kid even if I was the same age, but being a year younger than everyone, I was really the small kid. And so it was just always an awkward time. I mean, I think I didn't feel start to feel comfortable in my own skin until I was in college. Um, and that has an impact, right? I mean, I'm still unpacking some of that.
It does. It does. And from birth to 18, there's a lot of moments. In fact, it's funny when I speak to a lot of executives, they'll tell me, especially the guys, they'll tell me that one time, it could literally be one time that let's say the coach put them out on the ice or on the field in a critical time of the game. They don't even tell me if they scored or not. The coach actually put them out then, or their
Mhm.
parents did this, parent did that. That even one moment is what they base their whole confidence on in their life. So it is super important in
Yeah,
uh, in how that impacts. I know you talk about education. You went to Princeton, right?
I
Economics,
did. Yep.
magna. You
Yep.
did, you did pretty well with magna cum laude and stuff. So it looks like the Rolls Royce and the kid's father and the education thing. You really had a direction where you wanted to go.
Yeah, I absolutely. had that direction and that laser focus, and that led, as I said, led me right to New York into finance and Wall Street. Started at Morgan Stanley Capital Partners, and that, I can't say that was bad or good, but I mean, I had my, and I was in my 20s in particular, I was arrogant, a little obnoxious, or a lot obnoxious at times, because I never really failed, right? And everyone said I was smart, like, and now I'm working in finance and I'm doing great and I'm making money, and you're like, you start to believe, you don't stink, and that led, I had to get hit in my head with a 2x4 at like 32. I had a day that I long another long story, but the end of that story was, I was in a private equity partnership that started with some other partners, and in 32, basically, I was voted out of the partnership, and both deserve it and undeserved it. Ultimately deserved, but probably some of the reasons weren't appropriate, but I deserved it. And and that was the first time I'd ever really failed at anything, right? That mattered to me. I mean, I could dismiss failures that didn't matter to me. I could have lost a wrestling match, but that wasn't like what my ego was hooked into.
Hmm.
So that morning that happened. I came home literally that morning, and my wife told me she was pregnant with our first child. And yeah,
All the
yeah,
same day.
same day. Um, like one of those, there's not that many days, and you look at your life and say, wow, there's a day that massively changed my life. And then after that afternoon, we went to the movies because I didn't know what else to do. So I was like, 'cause again, I'd never had, I'd been working in
I hope you
finance. I've
didn't
been
went
working
to, I
eight.
hope you didn't go to see Rosemary's Baby or something like that.
No, I remember we saw a movie called Knight's Tale starring Heath Ledger.
Oh,
And
okay.
we saw it at the Regal Cinema down in the Battery because we lived at the time in Tribeca. And this is like there's not that's one of those days that I remember incredibly vividly. There are a number, but I'm good at not remembering things as often as well, which is also a different issue. But that's a day that, like, from the massive personal setback and the reasons it took me time in therapy to really understand, accept, and address a lot of the behavioral and personality reasons that were appropriate that led to me being, basically kicked out of a partnership by my partners. But that same moment, like, your whole life changes. You're finding out you're having your first child, like all of that. And for the next, really, that next 12 months, that, no, actually shorter. That was May of 2001. Yeah. Yeah. And I started writing a business plan that summer that I then was finishing that business plan literally on September 11th, 2001. I
Wow.
was sitting 6 blocks from the World Trade Center finishing a business plan when at 9:03 in the morning, I heard a massive explosion as a plane crashed into a building, which I didn't see, but I heard. I then walked outside, was standing looking at a burning building, and I saw the second plane with my own eyes crash into a building, right? Um, so that was, and that whole day, that whole day was another form of, you know, amazing trauma and realization and everything going on in the world. So from May to September of 2001, my whole world changed in multiple ways and pathways that um still, I profoundly, obviously we're talking about it, impact me to this day. But I think into this topic, we're part
Mhm.
of that. The people I was working for at the time were those who helped teach me about philanthropy and helping others and making the world a better place. And I was, in a period of learning still, but you know, sort of then you see the world as you know it sort of explode literally. Um, and I was, for the next few days, I had to evacuate. We had to evacuate Tribeca, but for the first 24, 36 hours, it was chaos. The police, city NYPD, let people back into Tribeca who lived there. You could prove that before they completely shut it down, said stay out. So I was at ground zero the night after 9/11, helping serve food to first responders. I was at the pit, like looking over it, like all this stuff that very people could do because I still lived there. But all of that was part of this transformation that I was going through, to say it took me, and I won't say I woke up the next day and said I was a different person or leader or world changer, but it put me, I think, on a path that had me more and more focused on what I can do to give back, not just, for a long time I said, hey, if I'm successful, I make money, I can donate money, that's good enough. It's not, at least for
Yeah,
me.
no, it's just part.
Um,
It's just part of it. It's interesting because I'm not an expert at it, but it's been shown clearly, especially for men, that that the ones that are the most successful are the ones that have the responsibility of a wife, a kid, a this or that, making a difference in certain things that happen, whether it's the coach putting you out in a moment or a horrendous thing like a terrorist attack type
right.
of thing that we take it in a certain way, which I think goes back to the beginning of time, probably how men are wired anyway. Women are
Right.
wired differently.
For
Um,
sure.
I know you also you went back and forth a little bit from PE, VC, stuff like that to COO, CFO types of positions. Were
Right.
those like portfolio companies or were those like, positions that you were recruited for?
Um, a hybrid of what you just said. So basically, for the first 18 years of my career, I ran money, whether in private equity funds, we did venture capital. It started and ran in my own hedge fund. I was always an entrepreneur. I'm pretty quickly, I can look back and say, my favorite is always be like, yeah, I'm an entrepreneur. I started a business for Goldman Sachs. I'm like, oh, okay, no, you're not an entrepreneur.
Little safety net there.
Yeah, until you have to make payroll with your own money, you're not an entrepreneur. And I've had to do that. And so, but along the way, started businesses. And so in 2008, nine, I had started and was running a hedge fund that focused on small and micro cap public companies,
Mhm.
being more like a private investor in public markets and taking bigger positions in pipes and different stuff. And the remember end of 2008 into 2009 was the financial collapse and the mortgage crisis and massive recession. And we went away for vacation after Christmas in 2008 and came back the end of that first week of the new year, and my portfolio in 4 days had gone down 50%, and
And
had
your
gone
wife, and
from
hold on. And then your wife told you she was pregnant?
no that um, no, actually, that at that point we had both of our children. We had been
Okay, just
this
checking.
is our yeah, our youngest was born in 2004, so our youngest was 4, and our oldest was had just turned 7. But came back in this somewhat liquid portfolio, became completely illiquid and went down 50%. And I was like, well, I'm out of that business. I mean, I have a responsibility. It was my money and friends to manage it, but I was never raising money again. And that, things happen for a reason. I mean, that cliche is always true. And I had toyed for a long time with, do I want to run businesses or do I want to invest in businesses? And I always said I wanted at some point to run a business. And I had a really good executive coach at that time. And she's like, look, Adam, and is that I say this as a statement, just a thing, not a anything. She's like, look, you're unique in that most people can only do one or the other. Most of the people who are good as a private equity investor are going to be terrible as managers. They don't, it's different wiring personality and vice
Right,
versa. So
right.
that you're not the only one, but like you're good at both. If you want to do either one, you could be good at it. So you got to decide what you want to do. I'm like, oh great, I got to make a decision. I don't know. I like them both or whatever. But so that would point to 0809. I was made the decision was somewhat made, put in front of me clearly of how do I figure out a different way back into being an investor? Or I've got these companies, a couple of which a bunch of them on the board of, and one of them, I'm called Synonym, I was the largest shareholder of and on the board, really was needed help to get out of that financial crisis. It was levered and had a lot of issues. And so I was like, you know what? This is the kick in the butt to move from an investor to an operator. So
Hmm.
I joined initially as the CFO. Pretty quickly, it was clear that the wrong CEO. So I then was the CEO for a while, brought in, and it's an entertainment distribution company at the time.
Hmm.
And we did other things in content, but brought in as a partner, and sort of became the CEO and I was the COO. A guy ran a bunch of studios in LA and Hollywood. So the two of us set out to build that business, right? And that moved me ultimately in 2014 to Los Angeles. I was for a couple of years in a row was getting Christmas cards from United Airlines. Bad. You never want a Christmas card from an airline. I mean, somebody in the marketing department there said, "What a great idea! We'll send our best guys global services. I'll send our best customers
Of course.
holiday cards to celebrate and make them feel good." For me, it was the opposite effect. I'm like, this reminds me I'm not with my family enough, right?
Right.
And yo, Tanya and I talked about it, and it's like, I was like, look, the only solution to this is to move to California because I'm flying there 2 or 3 times a month. And she grew up in Southern California and had to still to convince her because she's like, I don't want to be my mom in the car in traffic driving my children everywhere, which is what.
Hmm.
And I was like, it doesn't have to be that way. It's different. And we figured it out. So we moved to LA, and I ran that company for another few years till 2017, 18.
Did
And
you
then
enjoy it as much as the PE work?
I did. You know what? I'm not going to say I liked it more or less. I liked the same. I mean, but what I enjoyed was one one of the things I began to struggle with the PE world for me was just the people and the culture. Um, and for sure, this isn't why I switched, but like I might not still be married if I hadn't shifted because the suit of armor that I metaphorically had to put on every day to go do battle in the investment world, I thought for a while I was good at taking it off and being, a better and m- better human when I would get home, but I really wasn't, right? Like for me, I could not separate the personality, the traits, the tools, what you needed to do as an investor to then not apply that even subconsciously to, dealing with your wife and your children. I'm like, so moving into running companies changed that to some degree. I mean, I still was who I was, and there's still a lot of that's where therapy and lots of things still come in. But in running a company, it was much more for me the how do you really you have responsibility and care for a lot of people who work for you and around you. And it's not just about, I mean, the way I simplified to describe this to people, I said, look, Wall Street in particular, and that private equity, but all of Wall Street, what's the product? If you think about it, hey, at Cinedigm, we were making movies. So part of your return, your compensation was seeing the movie you were part of making, whether you were an accountant, a lawyer, the director,
Right.
whatever you were. Same thing if you're making cars at General Motors, right? You could be in the accounting department, you take pride in that Chevy, Suburban going down the street. You're part of making that happen. The only product or service in finance and Wall Street is money. So the only thing you can get excited about is a bigger pile of money. You don't get return from seeing the movie, the car, or whatever, the software, whatever it is. That it creates a culture and attracts a personality that
Sure.
is reliant upon that.
What did
And again,
was
I'm not
it who was the Wall Street guy? Was that DiCaprio? Um,
the Wolf of Wall Street.
yeah. No,
Yeah,
not the
Jordan.
Wolves of Wall Street, but also just Wall Street, the first movie, I think, where
Yeah,
he,
that was Gordon Gecko with
yeah,
Gordon
Gordon
Gecko
Gekko, right,
with Michael
exactly,
Douglas.
about
Yeah,
greed. Oh, that's
right. Greed is good.
yeah.
Greed is good. Yeah, and that so moving into running a business where we had product services, there was other things that made a difference that I enjoyed, right? And I liked
Makes
actually
sense.
trying to execute strategy and do all those things. And so that I think that was part of the next phase of that conversion, that transition into leaders who care, because I started to be more of that when I moved from running money to running a company, right?
Yeah.
And it's just that's been a journey. I didn't turn a switch on overnight. You had to learn, you had to evolve. I mean, I wish I had done that faster and more easily than I did at times, but I did. I learned, and that was part of that process. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how things do happen for a reason. Because it's funny, I turned down my dream job to work for a pro hockey team, and to take less money in a nonprofit, even though I got to travel around the world and met some great relationships. And it was the president of the hockey team that offered me the other job. That was the only person that recommended I take that job
Yeah.
for a reason, and a lot of reasons actually, personal and professional. So. There's a lot in there, which is great. So you mentioned about caring. What led to the decision, and maybe share with us a little bit about what the vision mission is
Mhm.
of US United.
Sure. I mean, so on that journey, right, of you know what one can do with one's life to make it a better place, there's all these random moments that sort of come together, a variant of your story. So while I was after Cinedigm, which is now called Cineverse, with a friend in LA, we started a company called Freebird. It was a tech platform, a marketing tech platform that sat on top of rideshare and
Hmm.
allowed any business, but we focused on restaurants and bars, for obvious reasons in a second, to reimburse some amount up to all of an Uber or Lyft ride if you came to the business and purchased, in this case, food or drink with a credit card that was linked to our app so we could close the loop and we could measure ROI and say, okay, if you come to, Cheesecake Factory and we'll give you $5 or $10 towards your ride here as long as you spend at least X and we can measure the ROI and we
Yeah,
could
I thought it was
prove to
brilliant.
them, yeah, it was brilliant, totally
Yeah.
brilliant. Um, Harder to implement than one would like, but we were making progress. And then this little thing called COVID happened, and every restaurant and bar in America closed. And as one of our investors said, if you had put a risk factor in your offering documents that said that would happen, we'd have told you to get new lawyers. But it happened.
And
And
you start looking up like, really?
yeah, but while I was at Freebird, so Freebird did not survive COVID. While I was at Freebird, another friend in LA said, Adam, you should join this organization called PTAO. Which stands for Plan to Take on the World. And it's a community of, in particular, CMOs, but also CEOs or other C-level from huge companies to entrepreneurial startups and marketing tech in between. The members represent more than half of all marketing spend in America. I mean, so some massive companies. But I was in this community, and because of Freebird, and then fast forward, it's May of 2020. We're in the midst of COVID. Freebird's basically on life support. I'm at home and just, hanging out, working to some degree, but also trying to figure out what we're going to do. And George Floyd is killed, and you're watching TV, and it feels like the world is coming apart at the seams, right? Between COVID, George Floyd, protests, and I'm screaming at that television. I'm watching CNN, which I try to watch no news anymore because it's all so just divisive. But I was like, this is not the country that I love, that I think we live in, that I think we aspire to be, and at times can be. I mean, not remotely glossing over the real problems that were manifested, but to see the violence and the anger and all the things that were going on, and you had Trump and divisiveness, all that. I'm like, this is not America. And I'm yelling at the TV, and Tanya's sitting next to me, and it's like, look, again, very smarter, lesson in life. She's like, nobody can hear you while you yell at the television. She's like, certainly not President Trump. He could sit next to you, he wouldn't hear you, but he certainly isn't hearing you when you yell at the television. So she's like, what are you going to do? If you feel this way, what are you going to do? And I had that epiphany moment. I'm like, I have to I can't just make a donation to X, which is money's important. But basically, if I'm not prepared to give my most valuable resource, my time, to make a difference, then nothing's ever going to change. And it was literally that epiphany moment. I said, all right, I'm not going back to private equity. I'm not going back to running companies. I'm going to figure out how I can do something to get back to the America, or help move the needle to the America that we aspire to be, not the one I'm seeing on television. And so,
Did you see any comments, any input, any reaction from your kids?
um, at that time, no. I mean, they were, so this is 2020. So, I mean, they were what, 18 and 15. They were in high school, applying to colleges. I mean, they're rightfully in their world to
Hmm.
some degree. Um, and but for me, that was the shift. I was like, and so the reason I said the Patel story is things that you don't appreciate. I was in that community, and since I'm an entrepreneur, I'm like, I'll figure out what I'm going to do. I have no idea what I'm going to do. I'll figure it out. And quickly within Patel, a woman has become a good friend who runs programming and huge pieces over there. Started a social justice task force because there were some number of members like me saying, what can we do, right? Because part of the ethos of that community is, how do you use
Sure.
your your position, your knowledge, your company to make the world a better place? That's part of
Sure.
why it's a unique community that I've stuck with. And there are a lot of members that have nothing to do with business, but are from not for profits or from education or from other cultural, social movements. And so I joined the Social Justice Task Force, connected me with another member who I'd met once or twice, named Ken Wadake Jr., who's known as the Free Hugs guy. And there's iconic imagery of lines of riot police and lines of protesters, and my friend Ken in a t-shirt that says free hugs, in between them preventing violence by getting people to hug but talk, right? Ken said, Adam, come with me. This was June of 2020. In November, he says, "Come with me. You got to come meet the sheriff in Flint, Michigan." I said, "What are you talking about? Like Flint, Michigan? The only thing I know about Flint is bad water, right? Like,
Right.
what do you mean?" And that's a very dated and wrong understanding of Flint. But he said, "Come with me." And I had missed in my avid watching of the news Chris Swanson. Chris is a sheriff in Genesee County, which is where Flint is. And on May 30th, 2020, when I was screaming at the TV, that night he rolled up in Flint with hundreds of deputies at a huge BLM protest ready to go violent and explode like every other city in America that night. And Chris, in a moment of what is authenticity for him, as I have not gotten to know him, he took off his guns, his body armor, his helmet, walked into a very hostile crowd in a sweatshirt that said sheriff on it, and said, "What do you all want? We want to be with you." And they chanted, "Walk with us, walk with us." He said, "All right, let's walk." And for the next several hours, ultimately, thousands of people marched arm in arm with law enforcement in the only city in America pretty much that didn't burn. CNN happened to be there, and 3.2 billion people around the world in 24 hours saw that happen.
I saw
Um, yeah, and
it.
Chris is he is an amazing human being and become one of my closest friends. So November 2020, Ken takes me out there. The three of us hit it off, and I'm like, "Look, you guys are amazing. You literally risk your life for, we didn't call it unity then, but you've risked your lives for whatever, I don't remember what we called it, social justice probably." Said, "I've not done that. I'm not saying I'm unwilling to. I've not had to do that. But," I said, "you've inspired me in one of my talents that I think, as I write really good business plans. I'm good at that. I'm going to go write a plan. Because if you like it, we'll do it together. And if you don't, we'll figure something else out." But there's magic that I think we can create. And they all agreed. And I went and I wrote it. And I was like, turned in my homework a month later. And like, this is amazing. Let's do this. And this became Us United. Now, that original business plan is very different than where we are today. There's common elements, as there always are. But as in any startup, it's evolved. You get market feedback and you evolve. And so where we are today is different, but we've evolved into a movement to build unity in America by giving all of us, right, everyday Americans, the tools we all need to reunite our country. It is not going to happen from any. It's not happening from our politicians anytime soon. Clearly not happening with our media. Clearly not ultimately part of what we have is a broken culture, right? And that's all of the things we're trying to address through Us United and build this movement. And so that's become my life's work, my life's focus, my life's passion. It grew, you know, at that time I was like, it was part time. I was like, I aspire for the day when I don't have enough time to spend on Us United or on anything else because Us United needs all my time. And that's where we've gotten to. It didn't happen immediately in that 4-year journey, but that's where we are, and it's all consuming, and it's amazing.
Well, it's, our life experiences are the foundation of where I think, anyways, where you most of the time get to where you're really supposed to be. And
Yeah,
they help you. Obviously, you should take on your experiences. In fact, in our business, even by placing executives in companies, we talk about what are the experiences and accomplishments you're bringing to the next thing, not what your resume is all about and
right.
your responsibilities and everything. And I think it's fantastic. And it's what you're doing is as right a place and right a time as ever was, probably. Even though they say this is the most important election ever. But it is the most important time with respect to not being united, unfortunately. And I think from my experiences, it was always accepted, at least in my family and where I grew up in Montreal. Um, Diversity, different opinions, different beliefs, different everything were actually looked for. So we can actually, you like that food. I don't like that food. Well, you should try it. Even whatever it was, foods, culture, sports,
Mhm.
music. It was great. And we never even had to say the word diversity often. It was like it's just something we were looking for. It's different experiences. And so what you're doing with respect to discourse, we need it more. We need to listen more. We need to walk together more. We need to sing together more. We need to laugh together more. All those are tools, some of the tools that
Right.
I think you're talking about. And can you share a little bit about maybe one or two experiences that you've had that really hit you?
Oh boy, there's so many. I mean, I'll focus on over this summer, I spent about 2.5 months this summer on a road trip across America in a purple and white pickup truck with a film crew. Um, and this group, back up a little, this idea to do this grew out of a dinner in March of now last year, March of 2025. I was at dinner with my wife. And so I'm going to back up few more months, the beginning of 20, end of 24, beginning of 25, where we decided at S United to create something called the Sheriff's Unity Network. We've done a lot of work with sheriffs, given Chris's background. And I mean, I didn't even know what a sheriff really was until I met Chris. And I think most Americans do
I'll
not.
bet you,
But
yeah, I'll bet you most people don't.
even if they've been in, I mean, many have voted for a sheriff and probably barely realize it. There's 3,086 of them in the country, almost all of them elected.
I
And
know what Andy and Barney did in which well Andy Griffith's show
yeah,
and all that.
yeah, there you go. That's right. I mean, most people think of sheriffs back to the old Wild West, right? And it is interesting. I am an official sheriff's deputy, right? One thing a sheriff can do is they can appoint anybody a deputy.
Yeah.
And because they are a constitutional officer. And so Chris has made me a sheriff's deputy in Genesee County, Michigan. I have a badge, I have all of those things. He will not give me a siren. I keep asking and he won't do
He
it. And
probably
I
knows you
don't,
well enough to not
he,
give you the siren.
he's very right not to. um, but sheriffs, because of their role, they're elected. They're really not viewed as partisan. They do a huge amount of work in building bridges in their own communities every day.
Mhm.
And we started to realize that sheriffs could become our partners across the country, almost our local ground force, our local partners, as we do a range of big media, big picture things, and sometimes you need to get very grassroots and very granular and very local. And sheriffs are our partners in doing that. So I'm dinner with my wife in March, and it's like, two things. Like, one, what can I do to grow and both the scale and the awareness of the Sheriff Unity Network? Because I think it's really special and impactful. And two, I'm like, this is March, to your comment earlier. I'm like, every day, the division in the country seems to worsen. And again, that is not a political statement, Trump, no Trump, none of that matters. But I think, and I know this from all the people I've spoken with, it doesn't matter where people sit politically, they do not want the division that we at least have presented to us. I'm like, we're at dinner. I'm like, if we're going to be a movement for unity for real, what are we doing right now that helps people come together? Because if we're not doing something at this critical moment, then I'm pretending to be a movement for unity. And we're sitting around having talk at dinner and brainstorming, and then I get this, idea and this look, and I got it. And my wife, like, she looked at me as someone who's been married to me for 31 years, like, oh God, I've seen this before. What is going to happen next? What's the idea? And I said, Great American Road Trip. I said, yes, it's a cliche, but it's a cliche because it works. I said, what if we get in a car and we drive across the country and we visit a sheriff or two in every state that's in our Unity network, and we visit hundreds and thousands of people and we film all this and find out what's really going on in America?
Mhm.
And so that idea happened at dinner in March, end of June, got in a purple and white pickup truck with a film crew and set out on a journey across the country to
Yeah,
do
love it.
just that.
Yeah.
I mean, life changing on so many levels, but that was long winded to your question. So, a number of experiences that really impacted me. I mean, just a couple briefly. Like, one, we were at a Bucky's in Texas between Dallas and Austin. We stopped there and we're talking to people and filmed a bunch. And there was this one woman who, lovely, she talked a little bit on camera, and then we stopped filming, and she and I were talking. She's like, thank you so much for doing this, and driving across the country and talking to us. And I'm back to something else, but she's like, I didn't want to say this on camera. She's like, I have a nephew who's gay and another nephew who's trans, and I'm just scared. I'm scared to even talk about it. And I was like, you don't have to be. She's like, no, and she's looking around. She's like, and I'm like, if you want to say more about any of that on camera, like, happy to, won't use it. Well, but she's like, no, she's like, but knowing that you were here and you're doing this, I do feel safer. I'm like, so you had that kind of a
Yeah.
moment. And then, you know, a moment where we were in Florida, in Tallahassee, and ran into a family outside. Doak Randall Stadium because we ended up starting a bunch of football stadiums because it's like, you look for landmarks and different things. And we're talking to them, and this gentleman, he was probably into his late 40s, early 50s, and in former military. And we were talking about unity because I ask everyone, what does unity mean to you? And do you think we're getting more or less united as a country? Why? What do you do to bring people together? And he's like, look, I'm with you. We shouldn't be this divided. He's like, but the one place I draw the line is if you burn the flag, you're dead to me, and I'm fighting you basically. And I said, well, that's so contradictory to everything you just said about how you build bridges and what unity looks like. And the fact that you were in the military, you talk about fighting for freedom and fighting for America. And I said, look, you know this. I said, the Supreme Court has ruled it's constitutional to burn the American flag.
Right.
So you fought for that. Like, so how do you then say you can't communicate? And we talked for a little bit and more. And I said, look, I'm with you. I, I don't want people burning our flag, but don't I want to don't you want to, what's happened that makes them feel like that's their only resort? They have to resort to that. Like that's the conversation. And we talked for a while, and you guys at the end he said, you're right. He's like, I don't have to like it, but I do have to understand what the issue is, and I can't just condemn the person because they would go to a place that I wouldn't. That's what freedom is. I mean, and I had a lot of those conversations, whether
Yeah.
someone wearing the red jersey or the blue jersey on some extreme, and basically helping. In the beginning of our trip, I was sort of passive by not too far into. I'm like, I got to talk to people, right? So,
Yeah, and to your point, for the most part, people just want to know that somebody's hearing them and what is going
right,
on.
right.
It's a general statement, but for the most part, that is what it is. It doesn't mean you're going to stop a serial killer or whatever to listen to him. But I mean, for most people, um, if they feel that you really, really did hear them, not like you kind of sort of heard them and then you're telling your own story to be better than them type of thing,
Hmm. Hmm.
it really can work. And it does take time, just like trust takes time and relationship building takes time. But got lots of time. If
Right.
that's the thing that's going to solve things, there's lots of time. One thing we say in LA, the fact that you lived here, you would understand it, is that we always want to leave them wanting more, so we can do a sequel. So since we don't have
Exactly.
feature film time here, I got one more question to ask you,
Sure.
and well, I got two questions actually. The first question is, I'd love to have that sheriff on Leaders Who Care sharing his story if he's open
No
to doing
problem. Easy.
and because that's the type of people we like to highlight, people that are open to stuff like that. And then secondly, the pandemic to a lot of people feels like it still was yesterday, if not years ago at the same time. I had a client tell me it was the year that flew by slowly, he said, which I thought was an interesting remark. Um,
Hmm.
with everything happening, we're already in 2026 now, amazingly. What are you most grateful for, and what are you most hopeful for?
Uh, um, Most grateful are the people in my life. I mean, I think as I've
Oh, and you just met me too. Hmm.
yeah, you know what I am for the work you're doing. I mean, what you're doing is very unique. This idea of leaders who care and recognizing that and prioritizing that is not that common in, let's call it, in capitalism. And capitalism would be better if we had more leaders who care.
Yeah.
um, but for sure, if I had say some of my biggest regrets are not prioritizing people, family first, sometimes friends, but what am I most grateful for are the people in my life and the people that I will meet. Like, I mean, I made some relationships and friendships from this road trip that'll last forever. So people, in terms of grateful, and hopeful. I am hopeful about, um, at least what I focus on. This ability to bring the country back together. I mean, what I heard so loudly and clearly on the road this summer was from almost everyone, we need hope. We need hope. And then they'd be like, you showing up in a purple and white pickup truck, you're giving us hope. I never thought that, by the way. That was, if you had asked me and I did write down some of my expectations before we left, that was not on it. But the fact that they're like, if you can do that, I can do something. And probably, I think more importantly, I could be telling stories that, hey, when I was in Texas, I heard this. When I was in Louisiana, I heard that. When I was in North Carolina, I heard this. And now I'm in New Jersey, and you're all saying the same thing. And people are like, God, I need to see that because I need that hope and I need that inspiration. And so, driving across America, you leave blown away by the American people, right? I get when someone runs for president, how they talk about it being life changing. I get it. Like, and I'm not we did, but like, it's just like there's so much goodness for a very unoriginal word, but
Yeah.
there's so much. I think what this country has, it's incredibly unique compared to any other place, is empathy. There's more empathy in America. And yeah, we see a lot of ugliness now that doesn't sound like it, but underneath it, there's really empathy. And that gives me massive hope. Massive hope.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think we're actually all exhausted from the division because it takes so much more energy
Hmm.
to hate and be that way than it
Hmm.
does to be the other way. And I think we're actually craving, literally craving, people to be caring and loving and all that stuff. And well, the one thing I'm grateful for right now is I got a new friend, so that's cool.
That's
And
great.
and grateful that you are a leader who cares, and I'm hopeful for the exact same reason. So so keep making a difference. Thanks for coming on and sharing, and we look forward to a lot more.
Thank you, Mark. It was great to do this.
Thanks.